Thank you for joining us this afternoon for Parksmart, Stories from Market Leaders. I'm Paul Wessel, Director of Market Development for the U.S. Green Building Council, and Parksmart is a project that I've been working on for the last 6 years. And I'm going to be actually very brief because you're very fortunate to have 3 people today who truly are market leaders. Ed Adelman from the Massachusetts State College Building Authority, Mark Tro from Lime Tree Capital, We Park, and Pam Messenger from Friends of Post Office Square. And they're really going to tell you, by telling you about their 3 Parksmart certified projects, they're really going to be telling you about what Parksmart is. And the essence behind Parksmart, and thinking about the opening session and what's going on in the world today, we realize that mobility is essential for human survival and growth. And a lot of the immigration fights we see today are mobility fights, people trying to make better lives for themselves and people saying, we don't want you to cross our borders. And we realize that buildings can actually help people be mobile and be more mobile and help them be more mobile in a good way. And so what we want to talk about today and what Parksmart does is really tries to figure out how to leverage the built environment to encourage more mobility for more people while reducing the strain on the planet, and in fact, hopefully by helping produce cleaner air, cleaner water, and healthier communities. So Parksmart is a performance, sustainability, and certification program. It's very much modeled on LEED and applies to parking structures. And it can be both new parking structures or existing parking structures. It applies to a standalone parking structure or a parking structure that's part of a larger purpose building, a podium of a building, part of a mixed-use complex. And what we did was we reached out to people in the real estate, parking, and sustainability and technology industries and say, what are the kinds of things we can do to make a parking structure be more sustainable? And they're all embodied in a book. Here's a copy of the book. This is the Parksmart Standard. But you're going to hear about them in real life today. But what they do, a parking structure is a building, and like any other building, it should be a green building. So Parksmart has 48 separate measures, which is what we call the credits in Parksmart, if you're familiar with LEED. And many of them are drawn directly from LEED. So they're green design and construction measures. Well, you'll see a list of them here. Green operations measures. And by the way, if you sign up on the sign-up list that's going around, we can make sure to send you copies of these slides and also some information about Parksmart. So green building measures, green operation measures, none of these are particularly specific to parking structures themselves. But then specific to parking structures, how do we reduce energy consumption? How do we help produce cleaner air? And how do we help produce cleaner water and reduce our reliance on fresh water? On the energy side, the 2 biggest energy on consumers and parking structures are the lighting of the parking garage itself and the ventilation system. So we have measures that address that, as well as energy resiliency and storage. On the air side, what can we do to decrease excess idling? How can we get people from wherever they're coming from to where they're going more efficiently? So wayfinding systems, both inside and outside the garage. Can we encourage alternative fuel vehicles, things like idle reduction technologies? EV charging stations are an important part of the program. And you'll hear more about many of these later. On the water side, rainwater falls on the structure. How do we manage that stormwater? To the extent we have facilities in the structure, are we doing, is the water management efficient? And are we looking at green roofs and blue roofs? And is our landscaping water efficient? The most exciting part of Parksmart for me is how do we help accelerate a transition to more sustainable forms of mobility? And there are a variety of ways in which we can leverage the parking structure to do that, and they include things like incentives for ride sharing and car sharing and bicycle parking and bicycle storage and repair facilities. Even charging for parking was something we realized was important, encouraging shared use of parking. So all of these make up the Parksmart program, and you'll hear from some truly exceptional people how they've embraced the program for themselves. But I want to start off by asking you a question, so you could help introduce yourselves to us. So I was wondering, it's about all of us. So by show of hands, can you tell us, and hopefully we'll be able to see you, what's your primary form of mobility? How do you mostly get around in your life? For how many of you is it walking? All right. How many of you use biking? All right. How many of you use some sort of transit? More of you, that's good. How many use car share, using Zipcar or Car2Go? A couple of you, that's impressive. How many of you, we have to add this now, scooters, longboards, segways, weird things like that? Any of you? All right. Ride hailing, taxi, Uber, Lyft. And how many of you use the family car to do most of your traveling? Right? That's about, hold your hands up, the family car people. What's about half of us? Yeah. 3/4 of us? And that's why it's important that we do this. Transportation is now the major source of greenhouse gas emissions globally, and it's the fastest growing. And we have to figure out some way to tackle it, and there are a variety of things we can do, but one of the things we can do is really take advantage of, in the built environment, the structures that we have built and are building to house cars, and try and help stem the tide. And so with that, we're going to introduce each of our speakers today. They're briefly going to tell you about themselves. They're going to briefly talk about their project. And they're going to talk about, for them, sort of in a nutshell, where the integration is between parking and sustainability. And then, in order, each of them is going to talk about their specific projects, what they did to get certified, why they think it's important, and then we'll open it up for questions and comments from you. So let me turn it over to Mark Cho.
Thanks, Paul. Mm-hmm. So it's great to be here. Great to be back here in Chicago. I did my graduate studies here, and I just flew in from Shanghai, China, where I'm currently based. But certainly, I remember when I graduated many years ago, I certainly didn't envision parking to be part of my career plans, and certainly didn't envision being up here to speak about parking to all of you today. But it's great here, and also joining Paul and Pam and Ed, and really listening to a lot of the leaders and the pioneers in the parking, being very much pioneers in the green parking space. I actually wear two hats in my day-to-day job. One, really as a senior partner for Lime Tree Capital, where we are a Hong Kong-based investment manager. And currently, we're running a program, a car park investment program in China, totaling $1 billion US. And we are the largest institutional owner-operator in China today, across 8 cities in China, with over 20,000 car parking bays under management. I'll speak a little bit later in my presentation about that. As part of our operations, I am the CEO for the actual car park operations that's called WePark, and that's where we actually operate and manage and leverage a lot of the Parksmart toolkits, which I'll speak later in my presentation. So really, for me, it's really coming from a real estate investment perspective, looking at car park as an investment asset class, as well as a car park operator perspective, where really I'm trying to leverage or sweat my assets to the extent that it can not only raise our revenues and yields, but also improve the overall customer experience for the Chinese consumer and introduce the concepts of modern parking to them. The project that I'll speak a little bit later today is called West Village, and you can see, pictures tells 1,000 words. It's a very interesting project where it really combines work, live, and play. It's a 1.35 million square feet facility. You can see there's actually a running track on the top of the rooftop of the building, and it's located in the city of Chengdu. Now, to most of my friends here in the United States who's not familiar with Chengdu, I think the analog is almost right now, it's almost like the San Francisco of China, where it's on the western part of China. It's a big hub for a lot of startups and almost Silicon Valley technology firms. And it's also home of the pandas, where most of the panda reserve is actually in Chengdu today. And really, I think my story is to really share a view, what we are doing in China to help address the current car parking shortage. The Chinese government has announced a few years ago there's 50 million car parking bay shortage today, and how in the past, because of poor urban planning, this is going to be a permanent shortage, how we're addressing the shortage, the sustainability and the electrical vehicles, the adoption rates in China, and how it's important to build the urban infrastructure of charging stations and infrastructure to continue to build usage and adoption of electrical vehicles versus conventional gas vehicles. How that, overall as a car parking asset class, and by incorporating Parksmart elements, how it's a better return on ROI, on ROE, on our investment platform. And really, what we're doing day to day in terms of our operations, how I'm lowering my operating costs in terms of labor, energy usage, as Paul mentioned earlier, how is it really kind of flowing to the bottom line for me? And I'll share with you how I'm leveraging my Parksmart as not only a tool, but a goal for our organization moving forward. And with that, I pass it over to Pam.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon. My name's Pam Messenger. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. The weather there is the same as it is here. This is a picture of the property that I manage in Boston. It's a city block in the financial district of the city. It is called Post Office Square. Our company, which is named Friends of Post Office Square, bought it about 30 years ago. We have renovated it and built what you see there. There is a surface park, first class park, and underneath it is 1,400 parking spaces on 7 levels underground. We are the lowest point in the city of Boston at 75-ish feet down, a couple blocks from the ocean. And we operate both the building and the park with the most advanced operational practices. We have taken sustainability and best operating practices to heart. I've been there 12 years, and this is something that's very important to me. I started by inheriting a property that was very well built and very well designed, and it's made it very easy to make it a more sustainable property when you start with something that's really great. You'll notice in the picture here, you can barely see the vehicle ramps. Even though this was built primarily as a parking garage with a green roof, we did everything about the design to hide the fact that there's a parking garage there, but yet this beautiful park is literally, physically, and financially supported by the parking garage underneath it. The city of Boston is celebrating its 400th anniversary in 2030. And they have our mayor has set a very aggressive goal of becoming a carbon neutral net zero city by 2030. There's a lot in a very old city. I say that with some deference to Mark from China, where there's older cities there, clearly. But Boston is very old for this country, and for us to become carbon neutral, there's a lot of old properties that need to get there. My building is already there, because of a power purchase agreement that we've done and because of our operational practices. But it's very important that I work very hard with city leaders in the city and other private property owners because it's going to take all of us to get there. And I'll turn it over to Ed.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you very much. I want to thank you for joining us. It's really a pleasure to share the stage with Pam and Mark and Paul today. For the last 15 years, I've had the privilege and honor of directing the work of the Massachusetts State College Building Authority, which is fundamentally focused on creating housing, required housing for the the 9 four-year colleges in the Commonwealth. So this is a little bit different for me because we're actually looking at a parking garage which we had to build because we've displaced so much surface parking by building these residence halls over the past dozen years. So the intersection for me in terms of sustainability and parking is really continuing to serve the student parking needs on our campuses, replacing lost surface parking, looking at a higher quality of land use, look at the greater density that structured parking provides for our campuses, and making these campuses a more of a walking, desirable destination, and also providing certification through Parksmart, third-party certification of the sustainable investments of the proceeds of bonds that we issue. Many of our investors are concerned about the sustainability of the debt that any public issuer provides. So this much like the USGBC provides LEED certification, Parksmart provides that certification for parking structures. Before I get into a little bit more detail, just to make this a tiny bit more interactive, tell me a little bit about yourselves. We just told you all of our personal stories. Building owners in the room? Couple? Designers, architects, engineers, members of the building design team, consultants? Yell out. What? Only half of you have raised your hands. What else do you other folks do? Just go to conferences. Okay. Well, that's good. Building. Oh, you build. We need you. Thank you. Okay. And do people like the special set? Don't be like me in high school, though, and looking out the window. Pay attention. So we're all moving very quickly here. The Mass State College Building Authority, in essence, is a public nonprofit developer for the 9 four-year institutions four-year higher ed institutions in Massachusetts and the 15 two-year community colleges. Again, the bulk of our work over the past 15 years has been about housing, new capacity. Those of you folks involved in higher ed understand that it's all about recruitment, getting students onto campus, retention, keeping them there, and persistence, having them graduate in some reasonable period of time. Most of our recent work has been new housing. This is at Mass College of Art and Design, and I'll go quickly here because the point is that these new residence halls, we've built about 7,000 beds in the past 12 years, have all been located on surface parking. This is Worcester State University and at Bridgewater State University. So the projects are all geared to recruiting students, having students, the well-qualified students that we accept are often desirable to other institutions and would not come to our campuses if we could not provide them with housing. So the goal is to house 50% of the full-time undergraduate students. So in essence, we have housing capacity for all students that desire to live on campus. We issue debt, project revenue bonds that service completely by the revenue of our projects. There's no public funding for this work. Student fees fund all of the cost of operations, debt service, and reserves. So you folks know, again, this is a green build conference, so I'm not telling you something new, but the energy and resource efficient buildings have the lowest total cost of ownership. We build and hold our buildings, we don't sell them, so we're very positively motivated to make the investments up front to achieve long-term operating efficiencies. And as I previously mentioned, we have a third-party, when we issue green bonds, third-party certification either through the USGBC or Parksmart. So moving into Salem State, as I mentioned before, we've increased housing quite a bit. Most of these new dorms have been built on surface parking. We're increasing density in the campuses and trying to create a walkable campus. We did a parking study to show us where we had the greatest efficiency. Salem State actually consists of 5 separate campuses, so we looked where is the deficiency, and is it commuter, faculty, residential students, staff? The garage itself displaced 350 spaces. It was built on a surface parking lot, so this is a garage of 780 spaces on what was 350 surface spaces in the past. It allows us to address stormwater runoff, and again, Parksmart served as a resource to help us design the building as well as the operations. This campus is located right at the edge of Salem. However, I'm going to try this. It didn't work in our rehearsal, but I'll try to show you here. This is the north campus of Salem State. This is the central campus. There's an athletic campus here to the left. Actually, you can see on this map here. And the greatest efficiency was on the north campus. This is the new structure, and my comments before about surface parking, you can all visualize a surface parking lot with no prevention of sheeting, erosion, runoff, carrying contaminants from vehicles into the adjacent wetlands, Salem Harbor, and then the Atlantic Ocean. So The structured parking allows us to capture that storm water to prevent that off-site impact. We created in this new parking structure capacity of the surface lot that was taken out of service, a surface parking here at Central Campus, and future capacity in the North Campus, as well as about 250 surface spaces along city streets in negotiations with the City of Salem and the residents to reduce student parking on campus. This is a scorecard. Some of you are familiar with it. It gives us, our design team, a way to track progress towards achieving the goals and the standards, much like the LEED certification through the USGBC. And then very specifically, just some images of the features in this garage relative to the Parksmart criteria. Recycling construction waste. This is a precast concrete structure, cast within 450, 500 miles of the site, using regional labor to put the project together. Focusing on existing public transit connections from commuter rail in Salem, the MBTA bus service, excuse me, and the campus shuttle system. So this is now the central hub of the student transportation system at Salem State. It also gave us, again, a formal structure to review rideshare programs, car share, alternate vehicle, low-emitting vehicle parking. This is our fourth garage, but it's the first one we really looked at with this in mind to really create an efficient and sustainable campus transportation system. And finally, we look at technology, minimizing the need for mechanical ventilation, natural ventilation, low VOC, finishes, tire inflation stations, electric vehicle charging equipment, and lighting control from both ambient, photoelectric, time clock, and presence of vehicles and pedestrians. So again, we tried it for a durable structure, no use of water in the landscaping, stormwater management. Time is short, so again, the key takeaway is that we've tried to provide, replace the parking that was lost to campus development, do it in a sustainable manner, one that could satisfy third-party scrutiny, and fundamentally in a higher ed setting to provide an example for students, future business leaders, government officials, and designers and builders of what sustainability is all about.
Glamour shot of my property. I never get tired of looking at these. For 30 years in the financial district of Boston, that's what you saw. There wasn't a single thing that was green, except maybe a car. It had about 700 parking spaces, and the local lore when people talk about this parking garage is that it was decrepit and falling down for its entire existence. I don't know when that actually really happened, but no one remembers this with any fondness. That's what's there now in that city block when you look out the windows. Our organization acquired the property and came into being because of a man named Norman Leventhal. He was the founder of Beacon Construction. They're a national or global construction company. He was an MIT graduate, if any of you are from MIT. He was the builder who developed all of the buildings on the right-hand side of the park, the red awnings on the hotel and the tower next to it. He did all of that when he was looking at the parking garage that was in the previous slide. And he knew that there was no way that this hotel and this office building was going to bring in the revenue it should if that thing was across the street from it. So he decided to, for the betterment of the neighborhood and for the financial betterment of all of the abutters, to convene a group of the abutters and decide to try to investigate how they were going to buy this site from the city of Boston and replace the above-ground parking garage with something better. Long story short, it took years to do, but he did arrange. He got 20 abutters in a room and he asked them for money they'd never see again and said, we're going to do this for the betterment of the city that we love, and all of your assessments will go up too. And so this is probably something that you will all benefit from. And long story short, it worked. And we had to enter into a development agreement with the city that we would replace the parking that was there. We replaced it with twice as many spaces, that we would put those spaces out of view that we would build a surface park that would be programmed and fitted out unlike any public park in the city, because we would have more money to spend on it, and that we would be an example of excellent land and redevelopment use. And we would do that 100% with private money. And to this day, we still 100% private money. We are a tax-paying organization. We are not a nonprofit. But we have been a leader in how to make a site do everything it needs to do and make it work. The garage underneath was called the garage at Post Office Square. It has all kinds of wonderful amenities. It's always been a truly great example. In fact, on our website, we have a quote. Someone called it the Garage Mahal when it opened, and we keep that quote 30 years later because we're still so flattered by it. We've had many people want to emulate us, but I still think we're the best parking garage anywhere. And we wanted to be part of the Parksmart program when we found out about it, when Parksmart was introduced. And we thought that we would just be able to walk right in and get it, the certification, because we think so highly of ourselves and our own property management. But we also know that we had done everything right and that we had this wonderfully green operation and energy efficient property. But because we were an existing structure, we were barely able to make it. And that's because with an existing structure, we could not document all these things that were part of the Parksmart process that we needed to provide documentation for. We'd been in existence at this point more than 20 years. We couldn't document our construction sourcing. We couldn't document where the waste went, the construction debris. We couldn't document any of that stuff years later. So when you're thinking about the Parksmart thing, it's harder for existing buildings to get it, obviously, than a building that's designed when you have Paul's book next to you and you're putting together the property. So, but we were able to get 93 points and to get the Pioneer, we were able to get bronze status, which we were very impressed at. We should have gotten many more points for our operation, but we couldn't prove it when it comes to documentation. But we do have interesting cleaning systems. We use ionized water instead of harsh chemicals. We have put all of the typical things that parking garages do. We have multiple ways to pay. We have the most advanced LED lighting. We have all kinds of lighting controls and motion sensors to reduce our energy consumption. But we also have found that it doesn't cost any more to keep your garage super clean. And if you ask anybody about our garage in the city, the first thing people say is, it's so clean, you can eat off the floor. We don't even use any chemicals on the floor. We use water and a lot of elbow grease, and that keeps the floors almost plate-like. You can see in the picture, they're nice and shiny. We also repaint them all the time and keep them sealed up so that there's much less wear and tear on the actual structure. We also like to tell people what we do, and we have become real evangelists for running a property in the best way possible. These are just some of the signs that we have around. You're not meant to be able to read that whole thing quickly while you're walking by in the hallway. We put signs like that near our elevators. And so if you've got a minute or two while you're waiting, or you're finishing up a phone call before you go down to the dead space downstairs, people will look at it. And we do our public education program, which we got Parksmart points for. But we also do it with the idea that we want to tell our story and we want people to see it, and you can't tell your story in a soundbite when you're doing really good stuff. So don't be afraid to tell people what you're doing and make them come back to your property 3 or 4 times to finish reading the sign. We use the footprint motif on all of the signs that have to do with our sustainable and efficiency projects, so that when people are in our garage and they see something with a footprint, they'll know that we're just blowing our own horn, and they'll go over and look at it. But if you have to choose where to park, it's like, what do the airlines say when you're on a flight? You have your choice in airlines. Thank you for choosing us. We say that every day to our customers. We know you have a choice in where you put your car. Thank you for choosing us, and let me tell you what we're doing with some of the money that you just gave us. The sign in the middle has to do with our reclamation of groundwater. We have 24-hour-a-day restrooms open to the public. We save 2,000 gallons of fresh drinking water every day because we were the first property in Boston to reuse our construction groundwater that's underneath the 75-foot down that I told you that we go. We have dewatering happening all the time down there, and we got a variance from the state building code, a plumbing code, to allow us to use it in our restrooms. So we were the first people in Boston to do it. They made me dye the water blue. I wanted to dye it green, and they wouldn't let me. But we basically rewrote that section of the plumbing code for allowing reuse of groundwater. I'm hoping that by putting the signs out there, and everybody knows why the toilets in our place have blue water in them, and everybody talks about how cool it is that this parking garage that they use does these cool things. But I'm hoping that there'll be another building soon, and I don't know of any yet in our city. Now I'm really going to get on my soapbox. I mentioned that we are already at the net zero at our property, and that's because we signed a power purchase agreement, 25-year power purchase agreement in 2016, where we offset 100% of our electric use by energy created at a solar farm in North Carolina, 800 miles away. I didn't even get any Parksmart points for that because we did that power agreement after the Parksmart certification process was over. But I was the smallest entity in the United States to ever sign a large-scale renewable energy deal when we signed it with MIT and Boston Medical Center. I actually spoke about that at Greenbuild last year, if any of you came to that one, and I look familiar. But that doesn't even do anything to offset what we're actually using in kilowatts at my property, but you can see that the reduction in the actual consumption, which is here for the past 6 years, and that's just because of the other projects that we're doing, but we're already carbon neutral. But what I wanted to mention to all of you is that that ROI, the definition has changed. I went to business school a long time ago, and ROI was a mathematical equation back then. And you just took the cost and you did the math, and if it was 7 or 8 years, you did the project, if you could get paid back. And I would argue that now the ROI equation has so many subjective variables in it that it's no longer really math. I would argue that you need to include in there the value of, when you're thinking about efficiency projects, will it get you better tenants in your building? Will it get you better talent at your company? People want to work at places that do cool things. Will it get you more customers? Will it get you to your climate goals that are being imposed by your city or state faster than you would get there by yourself? Will it give you more street cred? Will it get you an invite to speak here at Greenbuild? Over there's a magazine where my property is the cover story that just came out. I didn't even know this magazine existed, and we're on the cover. It's a sustainable design magazine, and Paul showed it to me yesterday. These things are really great, and it's been a part of my mission as a property owner, asset manager, developer, whatever hat I'm wearing, to be factoring that stuff into the math of business and of construction and property ownership. And it's not just about return on investment straight line the way it used to be. This is our Parksmart checklist. We got 93 points. We should have gotten a lot more if I could have done this. But we did get the placemaking, maximum points for placemaking. And that's because this is just more glamour shots of our park. It's technically just a green roof, but it is a beautiful place that is very well regarded in the city. It's won every design award you can get from every landscape architectural globally. It's been around 27 years. It's definitely a unique space in the city. And Paul Wessel told me that placemaking became a category in Parksmart because of places like us, so that we could get some points for providing something that's just really unique and different. And I know we've provided something unique and different. I might even validate all your parking if you want to come to Boston and check it out. So thank you. With that, Mark.
Hey, take you up on the validation. So why Parksmart for us? And when Paul brought out that book, I remember 3 years ago, I bought that book at a parking conference, and I gave it to my team in Shanghai and say, well, first translate it. And say, well, why are we doing Parksmart? And I told them, because our overall investment program at LimeTree was to aim to be not only about the largest, the most institutionalized car park asset owner and operator, but we want to be the best. We wanted to be the leader in Chinese parking, where the Chinese car parking market is 20 years behind the US, Europe, even other cities like Singapore and Japan, 20 years behind. And we have an opportunity to kind of leapfrog that. I mean, our investor base are people like the state of Washington, the state of Indiana, a lot of large pension funds, insurance companies. These are a lot of our limited partners. And while to them, car parking presents a very attractive earning stream, both in terms of cash yield as well as capital appreciation, we, as WePark, we need to operate and manage these assets and raise the overall performance. So I also discussed with Pam and Ed, it's not about the points. It was really about the standards. It's really about where do we want to be with every single one of our assets, and it becomes for our retrofitting team, for our project management team, for our day-to-day operations team, how we should be maximizing, our investors' dollars in each of our car parks. Right now, we are operating across 8 cities in China. As I mentioned, Chengdu, we have 14 assets there today. Chengdu has 20 million people. Most of the cities that we're in, it's very, very dense. And so compared to even some of the larger cities in the US, sometimes the car density, you have people leaving an event, leaving a concert, it's just massive. So it's also about thinking about how do we get people in our garages quickly, efficiently, how people come back to find their cars, how people leave the ingress and the egress. All of these are very, very critical things, which actually Parksmart helps us to address by setting these standards in place. And as I mentioned earlier in my introduction, the car market is huge in China. I think it's the second largest market behind the United States. There's 235 million cars in terms of car ownership, and it's growing 20 million each year. And just the sheer size of the demand for not only car parking sales, but car parking is huge, and we're there really to serve not only about just building more and retrofitting more car parks, but for example, putting in the electric car charging facilities and infrastructure in there, where a lot of the electrical vehicles, 30% of all electrical vehicles are being sold in China today of global sales. These are very key trends that we play on, in which our car parks will become the preferred locations for you to charge, because not a lot of people in China has the spot to charge at home. So what happens, they have to charge when they're shopping or when they're charged doing at work. So from a real estate perspective, from an investment angle, we love West Village. It's busy during the weekdays. During the weekends, it has a huge sports event. It has 2 mini-sized kind of soccer pitches. It has a lot of F&B. It has retail. There's 600,000 square feet of office space in there. So it's really combined a whole kind of workshop and play. And so it's very, very busy. The facility is buzzing, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's why our occupancy in some of these car parks across our portfolio is already at 65%. And we measure that over a 24-hour period. So in fact, all our car parks right now, almost 17, 18 hours, it's being filled up. That just gives you a sense of the demand that's there and the occupancy needs that we need to serve. And again, it obviously offers different things to different people. And so we study quite a lot, what is going to be the catchment area for every car park that we're going to acquire and operate. So we do a 300-meter or like a quick study, who's there, and obviously with the different areas, not only within the car park, is it office workers? Is it people coming in for casual dining? Is it nearby residents who's coming in to use one of the ride-sharing programs that have the electric fleets parked at our location as well? So these are very much elements that our investment strategies use. And then obviously our own car park designs team, would look into, well, where am I going to offer the monthly parking? Where's going to be the electric charging station? There's 1,046 bays, all at one single level. And typically in China, most of our garages and facilities are underground because there's really no space to build, and you don't see these large plots of the land in center city with a huge parking deck structure, because the best use of land in China today is the next big office building or shopping mall, and there really has been, honestly, not enough urban planning to meet overall parking needs. So overall, in 2017, last year, we achieved Parksmart certification. So I think the team has come a long way. And in fact, what we have done initially, there were a lot of the items we found we're going to be doing anyways. The first thing we do for any existing or new car park is we change the overall access controls, the car parking equipment, the barrier systems. We have changed it all to LPR, license plate recognition. And this is 3 years ago, where LPR was still not the standard as much here in China. We have the wayfinding systems, where it's very important for people to find an empty spot as they come into a facility where they can park their car quickly. And as they come back, as Pam mentioned, offering different ways for you to pay by QR code. We actually eliminated exit pay. So we don't have people lining up, queuing up to pay, in a cash register, and people actually can quickly just drive away after paying on their phones or paying in one of the panels that we provided. So it is very important to understand how people find your garage, how people find an empty spot within the garage, and when they come back, how to find their car, and then when they exit the facility, have an easy way for them to pay so that they exit quickly, and then we can really start the car park turnover in terms of our bay utilization, increasing that as well. And that's important, so there's not a lot of car idling, waiting to pay. There's not cars circling around to find empty spots. These are all very important measures, not only, as Paul mentions, like doing good by doing well. So really hitting a double bottom line, which is these are things from an operational perspective we want to do, but at the same time is really great for the environment. The lighting systems, we're working with Philips right now in China to really do the smart efficiency lighting. We have actually very much a central control room we've built in Shanghai that's attached to the 30-plus car parks we have already. But in the next few years, we're going to add another 30 and 50 car parks to our overall portfolio. So by having these standards in place, I talked to my project management team, and we can talk about, well, what are the things that we're doing in this car park, and now what are we going to do in here, not because for certification, but it really sets the standards about, all the stuff we're putting in the barrier systems, how are we going to integrate our service with the app that we have created, et cetera. So it really isn't just trying to be certified, but it is actually help to set our KOPs and KPIs for a lot of our operating colleagues as well. So the charging stations I talked about, the Chinese government is putting a major priority on the environment and is really boosting a lot of green initiatives. So a lot of the major car manufacturers, whether it's Mercedes-Benz, BMW, or Volvo, they all have local manufacturing capacity or plants in China, and they're rolling out the first all electrical vehicle fleets or the models up in China because of the big push. So we see, we are creating a lot of urban structure for car park charging. Here you can see we have working with 5 different ride-sharing companies in Chengdu alone, where we have 14 assets. And a lot of people come pick up their car, drive to one location, and return it another location in one of our car parks as well. So we actually increase the demand for our car parks by having these green infrastructure and then offering and working very proactively with these car rental fleets, where it's actually getting more and more popular and adopted in China today. And so, we're very quite excited about what we have done since 3 years ago. In fact, we're now happy to announce that we're now going through our second certification already for our car park project in Shanghai. And to me, as I was discussing with Paul over lunch, there's no end to this. We can be certifying all 30 of our garage doing Parksmart. But again, this certification is only, is really a means to an end, because what we try to do is really operate our car parks to its maximum potential, but at the same time, really offer a modern kind of parking to the Chinese consumers today. Thank you. I'll pass it back to Paul.
Thank you. So we want to hear from you what your thoughts are. Does this make sense? Are we hitting the mark? Are we missing the mark? Do you have questions about the program or what we've done? Anybody? Go ahead. So the question was, what is Parksmart considering for the potential of self-driving cars? I can answer that. Have you guys thought about that at all? Autonomous vehicles and what the impact's going to have?
Never crossed our mind at all.
Anybody want to take a shot at it? Or?
No, I get a lot of questions from investors because they feel, well, why do you need parking? But certainly, the way, at least certainly in China, the way we see it is, the government has come out and said they're not going to let even autonomous vehicles just to keep circling around each city waiting to be summoned. There needs to be a place to nest. So in my opinion, as we're acquiring these prime, very core city space for car parking where there's huge demand, we see it as like the urban infrastructure charging nodes where these cars need to be summoned. They need a place to be charged. They need to be a space to be, we talk about curbside access a lot in the parking industry right now, even here in the US. And there's not enough space for people to get in and get out. So the parking facility itself becomes that pickup and drop-off point, which is very important. And I can also argue, if it's all autonomous vehicles, my 1,046 bays, I might be able to fit 1,200 now because I don't need these kind of access ways, et cetera. So that gives me even more room to make money from that perspective.
We think about this a lot, all the time, actually. And I agree with everything Mark said, and I see that as sort of my successor has to worry about a lot of this stuff because I'll be gone maybe. But I think that that's something that what you said is all what we're thinking about. We're also thinking about converting some of our parking garage to battery storage. I mean, somewhere we're going to have to store energy from solar and wind projects, so we need more battery space for them. So there's a lot of things that we're talking about what to do with parking garage space. But another thing that I don't want to lose sight of is that autonomous vehicles, this is me personally, I have no evidence to back this up, but I'm worried that in talking about that, I don't see this becoming something that everyone's going to run out and do right away. I see this being sort of the way the hybrids and the electrics went, is that it's a very high income thing to think about. And that I don't think that the person who can only afford to buy a used car is going to go away too soon in this game. And I worry that we are making it seem like that we're just going to take this a wholesale societal leap off a cliff into this, and that there won't be any more combustion engines. I think there's still going to be that 15-year-old used car on the road because that's all someone can afford to have for a long time, for a generation after we start with the upper class, with the wealthier people, with the full electrics and the self-driven. I just think I'm just not sure that we're going to get there as soon as some people think we are. And I think we may be in for another 20 or 30 years of still dealing with a lot of what we got going on today. I may be completely wrong.
Another question? Go ahead. So the question is about electric vehicle charging. Currently, you have to plug in the vehicle, and there are different standards. It's a sort of VHS, Betamax sort of thing going on, which is one headache for people. But we will move towards a wireless charging, inductive charging approach at some point, and the technology is out there, and the question is, have we seen it much yet? And I think it's pretty early on. I don't think we've seen much yet. No. The key question is how much charging capacity do you build out, and how do you get people to move their cars in the middle of the day? And what sort of tools do you do? One of our strongest supporters is Brookfield Properties, and Brookfield figured that every electric vehicle owner would be a crunchy granola person who would understand the importance of sharing the asset. Turned out not to be true. So you can charge for 4 hours for free, After that, they charge you $10 an hour to charge as a way of encouraging people to come down at lunchtime, move their car, and open up the space for somebody else. Other questions? Comments? Sir?
As you went through the Parksmart certification process, what was the hardest or the most challenging adjustment or change you had to implement?
Okay, so the question is, as these folks went through the Parksmart certification process, what was the hardest or most challenging thing for them to do?
Well, one thing I had mentioned, there's the sort of checklist that some of you folks who have done lead projects might be familiar with. The real big difference between Parksmart and the lead certification is the Parksmart is much more about operations. That lead, there's a lot of infrastructure, building envelope, windows, things that you buy once, don't have any moving parts. A lot of the Parksmart is about operations. So I think documenting cleaning practices, cleaning supplies and materials was very difficult. We own all of our buildings, but we don't operate them. We're dealing with 9 different campuses that operate our residence halls and our parking garages, and that communication is not always perfect. We didn't get Paul in the room with us, so I think that it was about documenting a lot of these small operations, but add up to a substantial amount of the credits.
Pam?
I own our building and I operate it, and I still was like, do we have a policy on this? Is it written down? Can anyone find it? Like, just, all right, we got to create things. And the documentation was the hardest part. Physically, for me, uploading the pictures was the hardest part because my project was so big that it kept failing. I couldn't send it anywhere. But it's the documentation. It's challenging.
Mark?
I think there was a language barrier at first. Translating it took us a few 6 months or so. Since we all have a day job, the night job, they were translating. But I think there was a lot of, obviously, North American standards in terms of emissions. And I remember discussing with Paul, with the team, about, maybe China follows a certain set of standards. Maybe it was a Euro 5 standard versus some of these standards here in the U.S. So I think part of our mission moving forward is also to help promote Parksmart elsewhere in the world, such as in China, elsewhere in Asia, where there are other standards, and so that it just makes it easy for people and for the team here to evaluate as well, because then you're not comparing apple with oranges, and I think there will be much easier, direct, translatable kind of results that we can achieve for.
We created, I think successfully so, the experience bears out, a single system for new and existing garages. And it meant some credits were a new garage is eligible for, some an existing garage is easier to achieve. And sometimes sort of the balance of that is frustrating to people. There were things Pam would have liked to have gotten credit for, but didn't document. But that's not we actually tried to design the system so it was as broad as it could be. Go ahead. Yeah. So the question is, what would we suggest to make the documentation easier? So we've actually, it's a new program. We have 100 projects registered. We have 25 certified. And we work very closely with projects to help, because we understand it's a new program, and help them understand it. So we've gotten feedback about, we wanted to see P&Ls on the parking structure to make sure you were really doing paid parking. We said, that's stupid. You don't want to give us your P&Ls, and we don't want to have your P&Ls. So we've actually scaled back some of the documentation requirements. We've instituted a process when projects first register, we set up a call with you, with your GBCI reviewer, to walk through the program and talk about some of the issues and the opportunities to help guide you through the program. And it's getting engaged early on is really helpful. I mean, one of the things that often, I think, traditionally hasn't happened is there hasn't been an integrated process where the owner of the parking asset, the developer, the engineer, the architect, sat down with the sustainability people and the people who are actually going to operate it and talk about how this thing is going to function. Ed talks about the challenges of that, but we've discovered on new construction is really helpful to the team for everybody to get on the same page and be thinking about this as they're moving forward. So I guess the single thing a project can do is get engaged with our team early on and seek our advice and our guidance in doing the project. Go ahead.
Question primarily for Mark. What has the response, if any, been from your investors when promoting this certification?
And I'm going to repeat the question because they're recording this. The question is, for Mark, what's been the response to his investors to the process of seeking certification and gaining certification?
That's a great question because we were discussing this with Paul over lunchtime. And to me, some of the investors obviously ask us about, what is any kind of green or ESG initiatives you have done. And so to me, that's kind of a very good systematic program that we can explain to them. And at the same time, it's really a reflection of, I think, how well we're managing our business, how well I'm managing our business. We're really setting these standards and in place, which is very important for us to scale, because we're not talking about one facility. We have 35 now. We're going to be 70 to 100 in 3 to 4 years' time. So it's really about building that portfolio, building that brand. I mean, WePark right now is still a small brand in China. Every one of these cities has 2,000 car parks. What's 35? But as we grow and scale, then this becomes really part of our culture, so to speak, or part of who we are and part of what the brand stands for. So we want to be not only about be the preferred parking spot for drivers, but there's a lot of developers and that wants to work with us now because wow, you guys are a little bit more innovative. You guys are willing to take on some of the best practices and therefore get us better deals. So, and so in that way, it kind of comes full circle that it helps us in other ways. And I think Pam mentioned as well, it's not just about the points or, the ROI from Parksmart, but there's the halo or the street cred that you get from doing this.
Last question, sir.
I have a question about branding. So why Parksmart not need parking? Because we will hold on the sales job.
So the question is, why Parksmart and not LEED? Why is the branding separate? Why is it a different product? There's a history of back in 2011. There was actually our founder was a guy who built the greenest garage on the planet, he believed at the time, outside the Denver airport called Canopy, and he got it LEED certified. And he said, you know what, I'm tired of being the poster child for the problem. I want to be part of the solution. And we want to differentiate the high performers in the industry and the forward-thinking people from the bottom feeders. And so I want to spread the news around this. And at that point, USGBC decided to exclude parking structures from the LEED program. And we're not exactly sure why. So it created this vacuum, and people in the parking industry, the real estate industry, the technology industry said, there's an opportunity here. Develop this program, and turned out 2 years ago, we decided, and GBCI decided to join forces, and we came on board as a separate product. But in fact, in 2000, we realized we've introduced a lot of confusion into the marketplace, right? And that frankly, LEED is a solid brand, and nobody knows what Parksmart is. So we're going to be moving in 2019 to better integrate the programs to help overcome that problem and make it easier for you to sell and us to sell the program. But it's a very good question. Yes, yeah, no, we understand. I understand completely. And partly it's a process of USGBC trying to grow by incorporating new programs and having discussions about parking. I mean, frankly, when we went to present ourselves to the USGBC to talk about the opportunity, we didn't know if we were going to get thrown out on our heels. Like, parking? What are you talking about? So, there's this sort of silver buckshot view of how we tackle climate change. And clearly, parking structures are part of the built environment, and there's an opportunity to do something here. We have 3 extraordinary leaders who are early adopters of the program, who have great stories, and I want to thank them for sharing with us. So let's thank them. Thank you. And we're happy that they're really great people, and they love what they did, and they do. And our email addresses are all up here if you want to reach out to us. We're happy to talk to you for a few minutes now. And if you signed up on the sign-up sheet, we'll send you the slides from today. So thank you very much for attending.
Thanks.